Imagine two people open the exact same AI tool today. Person 1 is a freelance graphic designer working from a laptop on a kitchen table. Person 2 runs a company worth $1 billion. Same software, same model, same buttons to click. Who benefits more? Most people would say it depends how they use it. That's not the real answer. The real answer has almost nothing to do with how either of them uses the tool. And once you see why, you'll start noticing it everywhere, not just in AI, in money itself. A few years ago, the promise sounded almost too good to be true. AI, we were told, would be the great equalizer. One person with a laptop could now do what used to take an entire team. A small shop could compete with a giant corporation. Anyone with an idea and an internet connection could build something extraordinary. For a moment, it felt like the playing field was finally getting level. But here's the strange part. In the same years AI became available to almost anyone on Earth, a small number of people watched their wealth explode by hundreds of billions of dollars, sums most countries don't even produce in a year. One single funding announcement for one AI company turned 7 different people into billionaires, not over a career, not over a decade, on the same day. So here's the question that should be bothering you right now. If AI is available to almost everyone, why isn't almost everyone getting richer at the same rate? This is where it gets interesting. To understand what's happening with AI, we have to go back, long before AI, long before computers. Every time a new technology has promised to change everything for everyone, something strange happens. When the printing press appeared in the 1400s, it was revolutionary. A book that once took a monk a year to copy by hand could now be produced in days. You'd think knowledge and the power that comes with it would have spread to everyone almost immediately. It didn't, not for a long time. For over 100 years, kings and rulers handed out exclusive licenses to print. Only a chosen few were legally allowed to operate a press. Knowledge didn't spread freely. It became a controlled resource, owned by people who already had royal connections. Jump forward a few centuries. The steam engine arrives. Factories transform overnight. Productivity explodes. So wages rose for everyone, right? For a long time, they didn't. In England, weavers who had spent years mastering their craft watched new machines do their work faster and cheaper. The machines weren't owned by the weavers. They were owned by factory owners who already had the money to buy them. Some weavers got so desperate they started smashing the machines. History remembers them as the Luddites, usually mocked as people who hated technology. That's not really what happened. They didn't hate the machine. They were furious that all the extra wealth it created went somewhere else, to people who already owned the factory. Here's something even stranger. In the late 1700s, a machine called the cotton gin was invented to speed up cotton processing, designed in theory to reduce how much labor was needed. It did the opposite. Because cotton became far more profitable to process, demand for cotton and for the labor to pick it actually increased. A machine built to cut a workload ended up expanding it for the people who had the least power to refuse. Now think about electricity, the internet. Every one of these technologies arrived with the same promise. This will change everything, for everyone. And every one of them, in its early years, made a small number of people enormously rich, while most people kept living the same lives, just with a new device in the room. So maybe the real question isn't, why is AI making rich people richer? Maybe the question is, why does this keep happening every single time?
Let's go back to those two people from the beginning, the freelancer with a laptop, the billion-dollar company. Give them both the exact same AI tool. Say it helps write emails twice as fast. The freelancer writes to maybe 10 clients a month. Doubling that speed saves them a few hours. The company sends a similar email to 10 million customers. Doubling that speed doesn't save a few hours. It saves an amount of money that could fund a small country's annual budget. Same tool, same improvement, wildly different result. This is leverage. Not in the way you might be picturing it, something much simpler. Think of a small lever used to lift something heavy. Press it against a pebble and it barely moves. Press the exact same lever against a boulder and it can shift something enormous. The lever doesn't decide how much moves. What decides that is how much was already there to be moved. AI works the same way. It doesn't multiply people, it multiplies whatever they already have. Their customers, their factories, their data, their money already sitting in the bank. Someone with one customer multiplies into a few more. Someone with 10 million customers multiplies into a number most of us can't picture. So here's the uncomfortable possibility. What if AI was never built to create wealth out of nothing, but simply to amplify whatever wealth already existed?
Here's where most explanations get it wrong. Most people assume the advantage in this story is AI itself. Whoever has the smartest model, the fastest chatbot, wins. But watch what actually happens when you trace the money. The people making the most extraordinary fortunes right now aren't necessarily the ones with the cleverest AI. They're the ones who already own something AI needs to even run. Chips, data centers, power contracts, decades of stored customer data, or a distribution system already reaching billions of people. One chip company's founder watched his personal fortune grow from under $10 billion to over $150 billion in just a few years, not because he invented a new kind of intelligence, but because he already owned the factories making the hardware every AI company on Earth now depends on. Here's a number that might surprise you. In the United States, the wealthiest 10% of people own roughly 87% of all the stock in the entire country. The other 90%, most people, own almost none of it. So when an AI breakthrough sends a company's stock soaring, who actually gets richer? Not the customer using the product, not always even the engineer who built it, the person who already owned a small piece of paper called a share before the breakthrough happened.
It was never really about who has access to AI. It's about who already owned the infrastructure AI runs on, the data AI was trained on, the customers AI gets distributed to, and the shares that rise in value the moment any of that succeeds. AI didn't create these advantages. It found them already sitting there and made them bigger. So which is it? Is AI creating a brand new kind of inequality the world has never seen? Or is AI simply shining a very bright light on an inequality that was already there, quietly, for decades, long before anyone had typed a prompt into a chatbot? There's a case for the first idea. AI moves faster than any previous technology. The printing press took over a century to spread. The steam engine took decades. AI went from a curiosity to something a billion people use in roughly 2 years. Whatever pattern existed before, AI seems to be running it on fast forward. There's also a case for the second idea. The gap between people who own valuable things, companies, property, shares of stock, and people who only own their labor didn't start with AI. It had been widening for 50 years before anyone heard the word chatbot. Maybe AI isn't the cause. Maybe it's more like an X-ray. It doesn't create the fracture. It just makes a fracture that was always there, suddenly visible to everyone, all at once.
And notice something else. This isn't really a story about villains. It's tempting to point at a handful of billionaires and call them greedy. It's just as tempting to imagine some hidden plan designed to keep ordinary people down. Neither has to be true for this pattern to happen. A person doesn't need to be malicious to benefit massively from already owning something valuable right before it becomes more valuable. They just need to already own it. Here's the twist that changes how you see all of this. Go back through everything we've looked at. The printing press, the steam engine, electricity, the internet, and now AI. In every single case, ask one question. Did the technology change who was winning, or did it just change how big the win was? Printers with royal licenses were already advantaged before the press turned some of them into publishing empires. Factory owners already had capital before steam engines turned that capital into industrial fortunes. Companies with power contracts and customer bases already had an edge before electricity multiplied it into modern utility giants. And today, companies that already owned chips, data centers, customer data, and distribution already had the edge before AI multiplied it into trillion-dollar valuations. The pattern isn't that new technology creates new winners. The pattern is that new technology takes whoever already has the most and hands them a bigger multiplier than everyone else gets. Technology doesn't usually decide who wins. It decides how big the winning looks.
So if someone asks you, why is AI making rich people richer? Maybe that's actually the wrong question. Maybe AI isn't the story at all. Maybe it's something far older, far simpler, leverage. And the people who benefit most from any multiplier are simply the people who already had the most to multiply. Two people opened the exact same AI tool at the start of this story. One had a laptop. One had $1 billion company. Now you know why the laptop barely moved the needle and the $1 billion company moved mountains. It was never about the tool in their hands. It was about what was already standing behind them.